Donald Trump has admitted that Russia is controlling him and keeps changing peace agreement terms. But for some reason, Donald Trump urged Ukraine to quickly make peace in this situation. Listen, tomorrow Putin might change his mind again and will be too late. Nevertheless, the United States is considering introducing a new package of sanctions against Russia's energy sector to increase pressure on Moscow if it rejects the revised peace agreement with Ukraine. The United States Treasury Department said that restrictions are being discussed regarding ships in Russia's shadow fleet, as well as oil traders who facilitate deals with Russians. Already this weekend in Miami, Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, will again be negotiating with the Russians. And if there is no breakthrough as a result, Russia will face new sanctions. But here a discrepancy arises because on December 19, the United States Treasury Department unexpectedly, on the contrary, lifted sanctions from several companies that supplied Russia with equipment, particularly for the military-industrial complex. For some reason, Washington did not explain the reason for lifting the sanctions against Russia. Let's analyze this situation together. I'm Alexei Pechi. Let's discuss it. But before we start, I ask you to subscribe to this channel, like this video, and leave any detailed comment under this episode. Also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Pechi News. The link to it is in the description of this video. There, we post breaking news as it comes in. So, United States President Donald Trump urged Ukraine to act quickly in negotiations to end the war with Russia, stating that Moscow is changing its position. As territories are seized, quote, "I hope that Ukraine will act quickly because, every time Russia seizes too much territory, it changes its mind," said Trump, responding to a question about his expectations for the upcoming meetings on Ukraine in Florida. The head of state also added that the parties are getting closer to something. Well, what exactly that is, Trump doesn't know, but, it sounds very strange. That is, Trump admits that the Russians constantly change their position in the negotiations, lead everyone on, stall for time, but it's Ukraine that should hurry just to catch the mood of the dictator Putin, otherwise he might suddenly change his mind again. The American and Russian delegations will hold negotiations this weekend, December 20th to 21st. Politico, citing sources, reported that Special Envoy Stephen Witkoff and Russian Direct Investment Fund head Kirill Dmitriev will hold the meeting. Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, will join the American delegation. Before that, separate consultations are expected between American representatives and the Ukrainian president's national security advisor, Rustem Umerov. This meeting will be a continuation of the previous round of negotiations, which took place in mid-December in Berlin with Witkoff, Kushner, President Zelensky, and European officials. And according to the information, during those discussions, United States politicians offered Kyiv a security commitment similar to NATO's Article 5. And so, the politician also noted that Washington made it clear that it is desirable to sign the agreement before Christmas, otherwise the terms may become less favorable. In addition, the Financial Times wrote that Trump really wants to achieve a deal on Ukraine before Christmas. And what about the special representatives, additional? Witkoff, in a conversation with Zelensky, warned that he has only a few days to respond to the American proposal. In addition, according to Agence France-Presse, during the Berlin talks, American envoys pressured Zelensky, demanding the concession of the entire Donbass. However, the Ukrainian president rejected this demand, insisting on a ceasefire along the current front line. Zelensky previously said that control over Donbass and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant remains a key issue. The president of Ukraine stated that the country needs not only legally binding security guarantees from the United States based on the model of NATO's Article 5, but also its own army of at least 800,000 troops. Zelensky also emphasized that he expects clear explanations from Washington regarding what actions the United States would take in the event of renewed aggression from Russia. And against this backdrop, on December 17, Vladimir Putin stated that if Ukraine refuses to negotiate, Russia will seek to liberate its historical lands by military means. And today, during a live Q&A session, Putin directly stated that, quote, he's itching to keep fighting against Ukraine. And here, it seemed that a ray of hope appeared that the White House would finally increase pressure on Putin, not on Ukraine. The United States Department of the Treasury confirmed that the United States is considering introducing a new package of sanctions against Russia's energy sector to increase pressure on Moscow. If she refuses, she'll reject the revised agreement. In particular, restrictions are being discussed regarding vessels of the Russian shadow fleet, as well as oil traders who facilitate deals. United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent discussed these plans earlier this week with European ambassadors. And supposedly the United States may present a new package of sanctions immediately after negotiations with the Russians over the weekend if they don't agree to a deal. But, as always, according to them, the final decision rests with President Donald Trump. Although it is worth noting that the day before, 4 American senators representing the Republican Democratic Party introduced a bipartisan bill in the Senate that provides for sanctions for purchasing or facilitating the import of Russian oil and petroleum products. The document was called the Bill to Reduce Russia's Oil Revenues, and if the bill is passed, Trump will have to impose sanctions within 90 days against individuals and companies that facilitate the import of Russian oil. The formation of the sanctions list will be entrusted to Finance Minister Bessent after consultation with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Yes, the news is really alarming, and I understand that many people are just overwhelmed by such a flow of information. We live in a state of chronic stress, and it's normal to get tired of it. By the way, if you feel like you're already at your limit, like your battery is dead and nothing brings you joy, I have some recommendations for you. This is Baba Rapse's YouTube channel. This is the channel of a really great psychologist who, without using complicated terminology, explains very complex psychological processes using examples from daily news and helps us understand what's happening to us. By the way, he recently released an excellent episode about why we feel tired even without work and how to deal with it. Baba Rapse's YouTube channel link is in this video's description. Be sure to check it out, make sure to subscribe and watch the latest episodes. They're really helpful, it truly makes a difference. You know, it helps you get your head straight. Well, let's continue. But it seems that hopes for real sanctions collapsed today, when the same United States Treasury, on the contrary, lifted a number of sanctions against Russia. The United States Department of the Treasury lifted sanctions on several companies supplying equipment to Russia's military-industrial complex. This list included the Cypriot company Wells International Limited and its owner, Dmitry Bugayenko. A subsidiary of the investment firm, which is located in Moscow, Wells was sanctioned in 2023 for activities in the Russian financial sector. In addition, sanctions were lifted from the Dubai-based company 365 Days and the Turkish company Etasis, which exported sanctioned equipment to Russia for military purposes. Furthermore, restrictions were lifted on the Finnish company High-Tech Canesta and its director Yevgenia Dremova, who supplied optoelectronic equipment under sanctions to Russia. Another Turkish company, CPS, supplied German and American machines to a Russian defense contractor, which is also under United States sanctions. And importantly, the United States Treasury did not explain the reasons for lifting the sanctions or say whether their policy toward Russian recipient companies would change. But this means that Washington is simply opening up all those bypass routes for Putin, thanks to which Russia will once again continue to receive Western technologies, machines, and so on for weapons production. So, I want to ask today, how do you assess Trump's statement, and is he really ready to put pressure on Putin with new sanctions? Friends, if you found this episode useful, I ask you to support this YouTube channel financially with any donation or paid subscription using the links and details in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care. Goodbye, everyone.